Hello and welcome to MalMakes. Today we're doing a painting based on Galaga, but we're going to take it in a slightly different direction. This is the time-lapse. If you're interested in the full, you can click on the card here. Otherwise, let's get started. So I'm going with a slightly updated approach to Galaga. I want it to look a bit more realistic and have a slightly different perspective, where all of the enemies and the ships are more rounded, not flat pixelated. They're going to be a bit more realistic with some shading. And you can see my perspective here. From the point of the player, it's going to kind of be in the corner and pointing up towards all of the enemy ships up here. And I want the background, instead of just being black with some different colored square pixels to be stars, I want to do a galaxy or a nebula in the background. And in order to do that, I need this canvas to be black first, because right now it's gessoed in white. So I'm just going to re-gesso it in black, and then I can get started on the galaxy part. You can find canvases gessoed in black, but I can't find any in this size I like with the brand I tend to use. So I'm just going to gesso this one with black, and I have a artist black gesso here, and I'm just going to paint over the entire thing with a foam brush and give it a nice solid coat. The black gesso is dry, so I'm going to start to add in these clouds for the space in. And I'm using a damp sea sponge, and I'm using a bigger one because I can use pieces of it for the more green colors, and I don't really want to mix that with the magenta colors because green and magenta make a brown, so I can kind of just do the magenta over here opposite of where the green is going to go. And on my palette I have cyan, I have kind of a violet, a red violet, and a yellow green, or a blue green, and I'm going to use all of these as they are on the canvas to build these clouds. Once they're done, I can add a little bit of titanium white to lighten them up and then start to build in some highlights. Once I'm happy with these clouds, and I kept working lighter and lighter with each color, I can start to add in some stars, and I want to kind of concentrate them on the light areas, still have some in the dark areas, but there's going to be less where it is still black. And I'm using a high flow in titanium white and a toothbrush to apply these. I really want to make sure this is all dry before I start doing any drawing or painting on top of it, because if I use something sharp like the tip of this pencil, I could like chip away at these stars and like kind of pop them off. So I want to make sure it's very dry and very bonded to the layers underneath, so that can't happen between the drawing and any erasing. So I'm just going to take this white chalk pastel, because everything is kind of dark, and start to sketch things in. Now, with my sketch, I liked the idea and the composition, but some of the perspective things weren't quite right. So I'm going to work on making sure everything is 100% where I like it before I add paint. There's a few things that aren't quite right yet, like this bug I have to kind of figure out where he's going, and the spiral isn't quite how I want it. But I want to block everything else in with white first, just in case my hand kind of erases some of it, because I really like where the fleet is, where the boss ship is, and then where my ship is. I've blocked a couple things in solid white, but not everything, and the reason for that is if I had blocked in this entire ship in white or the player ship down here, I would lose the detail. I would lose kind of where the cockpit is or where these are compared to this part, or even this little prism shape here. I would lose all of my lines. So I need to work in pieces, kind of like a puzzle. I'm going to work on this piece of the puzzle and then this one, and they're right next to each other, so I got to do one first before the other. I've also drawn in the tractor beam, and it took a little bit to get it right. I kind of had the idea of like how big it should go and kind of how the loops are going to kind of swirl down here, but the problem is when I drew it the first time I kind of tilted them all this way, so it was kind of coming out at an angle, and I wanted them to be perfectly horizontal, because if you saw it straight on like in the game, it would just be these nice little concentric rings. Blocked in the entire fleet with their colors, but they need some value because they're not really standing out and they're kind of just flat on the canvas. So I'm taking each of their colors, so like yellow and red and blue for these front row ones, and I'm going to mix that with white and black separately, so I have a dark and a light version of each of those colors. Then I can start to add some value, so these red parts on the very bottoms will look like they're actually coming forward in space, and where their heads are going back in space. The hardest thing about this piece is taking these kind of slightly abstracted, pixelated items and turning them into 3D space objects. Sort of see how they should look if they were tilted and you could see them in 3D. What the bottoms would look like, what the sides would look like. So I think that's the hardest thing about it, but it's also kind of the neatest thing about this painting. So I filled in most of this ship here. I still have this one side to go. And then there's some details, like there's some orange parts that sit on these arm parts. There's like some antenna from this side and antenna from this side and some eyes on this side. So I'm going to continue to fill that in, but I'm also working on the player ship down here. I've started to mark it in gray, but it's going to get some value where I have a highlight across this part of the front of it, just like I have that same highlight right here. There's also a little bit of blue in it that I'm going to add in and some red, but I'm just going to continue to fill that in as I've been doing this ship. I've been working on using some slightly transparent zinc white to make the ship a little bit lighter, at least with the gray part. because it should be a bit more white, I'm just going to kind of keep pushing it whiter and whiter in some of these highlight areas. Now for this part of the ship, the cockpit, I'm going to kind of give just a hint of things inside by just using some of this cadmium red with Mars black to make it darker, and then just kind of bringing all of that in there just to give it a hint of something. Once it dries, I can kind of do like a little wash over just to kind of make it a little bit more transparent, like there is glass in between, and I can put a highlight on top of that glass when it's all done. I'm also going to work on the spiral. Now, the tractor beam part that comes out of the ship has kind of like a teal color, a blue color, and it looks like to me, because it looks like it could be a spiral on its side, is that the outside parts are teal and the inside parts are blue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of fade from blue here, and then as I get to the side where you'd start to see like the back of it, I'm going to make it teal when it goes on the inside of each loop, and then back to blue, back to teal, all the way up into the ship. And we're done! We have a scene from Galaga. If you're interested in this piece, you could buy a poster or a phone case, or bid on this original canvas. There's links down below. Also, consider supporting me on Patreon. You can find out more at supportmal.com. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of MalMakes, and I'll see you again here for another video game painting.